This episode is brought to you by The Science of Scaling. And The Science of Scaling is a podcast that, honestly, you should check out.
Yeah, it's called The Science of Scaling, and it's all about how to scale a business successfully, whether it's how to find outside capital or what to look for in your very first sales hire.
It's a new show hosted by Mark Roberge. She's the best-selling author of The Sales Acceleration Formula. He's also a senior lecturer at Harvard Business School and the founding CRO of HubSpot.
One thing that Mark mentions in the show is whether your company is valued at $1 million, $10 million, $100 million, the failure rate is the same, which means we suck at scaling.
In each episode, you'll hear interviews with people like Kyle Parrish, the VP of Sales at Figma, and Kevin Egan, the head of sales at Atlassian.
I've checked out a few episodes of The Science of Scaling, and it's great. Like, for me, I run a company as a bootstrap company. We're not the kind of company that's raised capital, but even still, things like sales, that's super important, and it's the lifeblood of our company. So for me, it's definitely helpful to hear how other people have sort of, who have been there and done it before, how they're actually approaching scaling. So go on in your favorite podcast app, whatever it might be, and search for The Science of Scaling. That's The Science of Scaling. Check it out. I think you're really going to enjoy it. This episode of Rocketship.fm is sponsored by Industry, the Product Conference. This October, gather with hundreds of product managers and product leaders from all around the world for 2 days of keynote talks, challenging working sessions, interactive discussions, social events, and more. Or add a third day and take part in half-day workshops with some of today's top product management facilitators for workshops on leading your teams to innovation, product roadmaps, achieving product market fit, and more. This year's lineup may be the best yet, with keynote speakers including product legend Marty Kagan. He's the author of the book Inspired, which is considered by many to be the seminal book for product managers and product leaders. There's also product positioning expert and author of Obviously Awesome April Dunford, and product leaders from Figma, IDEO, Amplitude, and so many other places. Plus, if you use the code Rocketship, you'll save $100 off your pass. Visit industryconference.com/global for more details. Again, industryconference/global for more information, but pricing increases on the first of the month, so register soon to save.
So as many of you may know, I ventured out this year. I left my job as the chief product officer at Dribbble to start a brand new company, and that company is gigantic. No, really, that's the name. We're actually very small today, but we are the training institute of the future. And my goal is to help you master the new influential disciplines that are driving results within organizations. And we're starting with some absolutely incredible courses like product leadership taught by Ben Foster, the former CPO at Whoop, deconstructing leadership with Allison Go, formerly of Meta and Amazon. We have revolutionizing marketing with AI, which is taught by Marie Osipova, who is the chief marketing officer at Penny.ai, and an upcoming product management course, which is taught by my co-host, Mike Belcito, along with Anna Marie Clifton of Coinbase and Asana, and Victoria Kennedy, who worked at Axios and Huge, and is now running her own venture capital studio. It's not just video courses. We're combining video lectures with take-home assignments and exercises, and then small group mentorship to really help make this information indelible for you and to help level you up, and all at a cost that most companies' learning and development budget covers. So if you're interested, go to gigantic.is, that's gigantic.is, sign up for a course, and you can actually schedule a call with me, and I'll walk you through everything that you need to know. And if you enroll and let me know that you heard about this on Rocketship, I've got a special discount for you. So go to gigantic.is, sign up today, and start your journey upskilling your product, leadership, and marketing skills. I can't wait to see you there.
Welcome to the Rocketship podcast. I'm Michael Sacca.
I'm Joelle Steiniger.
And I'm Matt Goldman.
And we're having 20-minute talks with entrepreneurs teaching you how to launch your product into revenue.
Check out our book at howtobuildarocketship.com to reserve your launch discount and to download a free chapter.
Today we talked with Brennan Dunn, founder of PlanScope, author of Double Your Freelancing Rate, and a number of other books and courses. He talks all about how he uses one list to market all of his products and how he also leaves the door open to sell any number of future products or services. We learned a lot about how we're doing things the wrong way, and I think you will too.
Welcome to the Rocketship podcast. We're here with Brennan Dunn. Brennan has started a consultancy and has since transitioned into products, namely PlanScope. He also has a number of informational products for consultants. So, Brennan, thank you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about you getting started. You were doing a consultancy. You built it up to 10 employees. And why did you decide to change? And what did that look like for you?
Really, there were two factors. The first and most important was the fact that we had some health issues at home that kind of required me to not be out of the house as much as I used to be. So that really was the core thing. But secondly, I was responsible for bringing in $100,000 a month in client work. And that got a little stressful over time.
Sure.
So I looked up to people who had products and who were making recurring revenue through products, and I wanted to be there too. So instead of building things for other people, I started building stuff for myself.
So what was your first step in stepping away from the agency?
The first was definitely I took Amy Hoy's 30 by 500 course, which was probably the thing that kind of set my head straight on, that there's more, like, you don't need to go down the typical startup route of, some millions of users and raising money and all that kind of stuff, right? So this was, I want to say 3 years ago, I took her class, which set me down the path of building PlanScope. And that was definitely the first step. And I launched PlanScope, did the typical startup-y, let's try to advertise it and let's try to, pay for traffic and all the stuff that ended up kind of fizzling out. And the interesting thing is after I started teaching, after I started writing books and teaching classes and curating both a newsletter and a podcast, PlanScope's growth has just been tremendous as a result. So, I made a lot of money through information products, which also helped me make even more money with PlanScope.
Very cool. So you've done amazing work with lists. It's one of the things that you're kind of known for. Tell us a little bit about how you started out building your list and give us an idea of where you are today.
So it's kind of funny. I really didn't start out thinking that I was going to build up a list or a newsletter or an audience or anything like that. I pre-sold my first book, Double Your Freelancing Rate, and I felt bad for taking money and not giving anything in return. So I decided to just email the customers each week with excerpts of what I was writing and kind of what I was focusing on next, and just kind of summing up what I was doing. And I did this until I launched the book. And after launching the book, I was really at a crossroads. I could either shut it down, shut down the list and just deliver the book, or I could keep it up. Mm-hmm. So I kept writing new content for the customers of my book. And I got this email from one of the subscribers saying that he was forwarding it on to a friend of his each week, and that his friend wanted to be on the list, but wasn't really ready to buy the book yet. And like light bulb moment, I was like, oh, I could actually make this like a public list. And who knows, maybe it could even help me sell the book. Because, the hesitation was, the friend didn't want to buy from this no-name author, right? He wanted, people, it's risky, right? You don't want to spend money and spend time reading a book that ends up not helping you. So I've since learned that by giving away stuff for free in the form of a newsletter or just email courses or whatever else, that you can actually be pretty effective when it comes to, selling books or whatever else you might be selling.
So to get to know a bit more about that transition, you just took the Double Your Freelancing Rate list and started sending them your weekly newsletter.
Yeah, it's funny. I used MailChimp for up until last May, and from the beginning, my weekly newsletter, like the list name on MailChimp, was Double Your Freelancing Rate. So It's always been that, even though publicly the name was always Freelancers Weekly, once I made it like an official mailing list. But yeah, I mean, it came out of a book. And I think that's actually, my friend Nathan Barry likes to say that, if you're starting an audience, the best thing to do is to kind of create that audience with the intention of a single product, right? Like start with a product first to build the audience. And that's effectively what I did without really knowing what, while stumbling in the dark, I guess. Right. So it was at first a book list, and then it became something much bigger. Now it's almost at about 10,000 people. Wow. So it's grown quite a bit.
And most of that was over 1 year or so that you grew it?
The list started officially in August of 2012, I want to say. So it's almost been 2 years.
So you talk a lot about this single list that you have, and yet you have such a wide range of other products. Can you describe kind of the landscape of what your lists look like? Because I'm assuming that you do have more than one, and some are more specific. The Freelancers Weekly being kind of your centralized hub.
So that's the magic. I don't use lists any longer. I gave up on MailChimp and moved to a tool called Infusionsoft. And what I love about Infusionsoft is they have no concept of lists. What they have are contacts. You have, people in your database. And then each of these contacts have tags. So a tag could be, on my newsletter, took so-and-so course, bought book, subscribes to PlanScope, whatever. And what I'm able to do is send out either, broadcast emails or campaign sequences like autoresponders based off the presence or the non-presence of these tags. So I have a big customer database, or contact database, which is now at about, it's actually more than my newsletter. People with the newsletter tag are at about 10,000 now. Total is higher because I've had people who bought the book and aren't on my list or whatever else. So, that's how I'm doing it these days. I don't have any concept of lists. I have I have contacts who have attributes assigned to them, which allow me to do stuff.
This episode is brought to you by Miro. So when I was at Dribbble, over the 6 years, there was one tool that we would always use when we were doing cross-team collaboration. Whenever the collaboration started to get complex, we would bring in Miro. It made it incredibly easy to align stakeholders across regions and time zones, and definitely teams, with ease. And we were able to do all of that while being a completely remote team. It also has integrations into Jira, Azure, Rally, a lot of the tools that you're using already for product management and engineering. So you can import tasks from them as native cards, and it helps you see the big picture. It also helps stakeholders to understand what work needs to be done. It was incredibly valuable. And then they even have an estimation app that gives you a clear understanding of the work scope, lets you identify gaps, and then it has the ability for you to set clear expectations for delivery, especially when you're working across functions. So your first 3 Miro boards are free forever when you sign up today. Go to Miro.com/podcast. That's Miro.com/podcast. This episode is supported by the AWS Insiders podcast. AWS Insiders is a fast-paced, entertaining, and insightful look behind the scenes of AWS and cloud computing. Hosts Raul Submaranian and Hillary Doyle dig into the current state and the future of AWS by talking with people and companies that know it best. It's a show that's full of opinions, takeaways, and untold stories about the challenges, innovations, and mind-blowing promise of cloud computing. I checked out AWS Insiders, and look, it is a fantastic show, and it's perfect for anyone in tech who's looking for some of those behind-the-scenes stories, for some reassurance that, things are a little nuts everywhere, and everyone is struggling with a lot of the same problems. The first episode of season 2 is all about filling the cloud talent gap, and it's an interesting discussion on what do we do to help to staff up internally What are some of the challenges that companies are facing? Search for AWS Insiders in your podcast player. We'll also include a link in the show notes. Thank you to AWS Insiders for their support.
Was it always like that even before you started using Infusionsoft? You really just had one single list for everybody?
No, I did a lot with MailChimp. I mean, the unfortunate part of MailChimp is let's say you have a newsletter and you want people to join an email course, right? And that email course might have the intention of getting people to buy a certain new product of yours. The typical thing you would need to do is you would have like a list for a separate list within MailChimp that people would need to opt into also. And that would be kind of that products list. So back with MailChimp, I did have multiple lists, but I've since kind of freed myself, I guess, from that whole concept.
And cost-wise, the one thing holding us back from doing something like Infusionsoft is that it's expensive up front. And for someone like yourself that already has products that are selling to the list, it's pretty easy to justify. I think you actually made a pretty big profit by turning that on, right?
Yeah, I mean, Infusionsoft or
Infusionsoft.
HubSpot. Yeah, Infusionsoft or HubSpot or any of these big kind of like enterprise tools, I wouldn't recommend until I like to think that when you're doing 100,000 a year in products, it would make sense to do that. But I would really use something like MailChimp or Aweber and just get it to its capacity until you make that switch. Like I was telling somebody today, you can use MailChimp plus Gumroad and then use Zapier in between and get a lot of what I'm doing kind of, you can replicate a lot of what I'm doing that way. But,
and would that be by segmenting the list when people buy certain products?
Yeah, like you could say you have a product, say you want to, like I'm a big fan of accountability courses, and that's kind of like the inverse of an email course. So if an email course is meant to sell somebody on a product, an accountability course is kind of like once they've bought the product, helping them make the best use of it by sending them like additional content over time or checking in and saying, hey, have you applied X, Y, and Z from chapter 3 yet? And sending them, that a week after they bought or something. So I do a lot of that. And that's also a great way to kind of glue people together from going from like product A to product B. But that could be done easily with, a Gumroad Zapier hook that ends up triggering some sort of autoresponder in MailChimp.
Yep. So this is all super interesting because when we started Minimalytics, we had one list for that, and it's actually grown to be our biggest list over time. And it consists of mostly freelancers and agencies, but we haven't done very well at all in keeping that list in contact with us or sending out anything of value really over time. It's been pretty quiet. And we thought of that as a negative. We've been looking at how you do your list lately and trying to think how we could get more of a consistent weekly newsletter. But we thought about that list up until a few minutes ago as kind of a lost cause. It's good for that product still, but not good for anything else. But what you were saying about Nathan Barry got me thinking that maybe that is a good place to use as a jumping off point for new content or I'm not sure yet, but it could be used as something else, even though that wasn't our original intention. When you pivoted the book list, did you let them know that anything was changing, or had you already been sending out weekly at that point, and to them, they just realized that they were now on your weekly list?
Yeah, there was never a delay, and there was never really a transition. It basically just became, there's never like an announcement saying, hey, this is no longer about the book anymore. This is about general purpose consulting. Like there was none of that. However, I do think if you're saying that there's been a lot of, if they haven't heard from you for a while and people did explicitly sign up with the intention of getting software and it's been a while since you've contacted them, I would just send like one email that says, hey, like we have a lot of advice on how you can, you bought the software because you wanted to create more valuable clients who stuck around with you longer. Like we're going to talk to you now. Like we want to move this to be more holistic, less about just that part of your business and more about how you get these clients to pay you on a monthly basis or how you set up retainers or how you do whatever. We're going to start sending you content each week or each month or whatever your interval is. And we just want to let you know, here's the first one. If you don't want this, that's fine. There's an unsubscribe link at the bottom. Like for the longest time, I had a little disclaimer at the top of each newsletter that said like, you're getting this because you bought a book of mine or you opted into my newsletter. Like if you don't want to get this anymore, there's an unsubscribe link at the bottom. And I did that for a while. And that worked great.
You're sending emails every single week, and for me, as a founder, that almost seems like a daunting task. I'd be curious to know how far in advance you're creating this content, or what your process looks like.
It's pretty much just in time. I mean, I'm going to be sending one out tomorrow, and I wrote it on Monday. So typically, I just schedule. Like I set aside Mondays to be my writing day, and I write it then. I mean, it gets easier over time. As you write more, it becomes less of like a difficult thing to do. And secondly, a lot of my call to actions on my newsletter are reply and tell me about some specific problem that you have. And you're able to quote those responses and use them to kind of lead into another email. So like a third of the email could be just a copy and paste like question that somebody asked you about something. I haven't done that, but I used to do that a lot.
That's cool. You're crowdsourcing your content essentially.
Yeah, and what's great about that is it allows you to it really allows you to understand how people word their problems, which then, I mean, if you're using it, like, let's say you're using this list to help you solve problems and you ask people point blank, like, what sucks about pricing? Like, what's keeping you from charging more? The responses I got allow me to understand how people phrase that problem themselves. And then I'm able to kind of normalize that over time and recycle it all back into my marketing. So all of my marketing is a direct response really to what people have told me over email.
Very nice. I mean, it sounds like it's an essential part of your business that everyone should be fostering in their own.
Definitely. I mean, even if you're building software, like typically most software types think, the extent is we're building sexy wrappers around credit operations, like saving your database, right? Like, but people are buying because they want to have a better business. So if you can really peel back the layers and understand why, why do they want, like, what about this better business appeals to them, and how does your software or your book or your video course or your newsletter or whatever fit into that? That is such an important thing that I think a lot of us miss. Like, we don't understand that. And I was guilty of this. Like, I resisted for the longest time writing a book until I realized people buy my book for the same reason they buy my software, because they want to have a better consulting business. And my software helps them do that in one way, but the book helps them do that in a totally different way, but a complementary way.
Probably a lot of times a more powerful way.
It's a lot more direct, right? Like if you write a book on pricing, the feedback loop is much sooner than like with a project management app that could maybe make their business better over the long haul.
Yeah, I mean, I've
with the book first.
I've told you this before, but the Double Your Freelancing Rate book pushed us to charge way more on a client project, which extended our runway by months. And there's no software I can think of that would have pushed us to do something differently that would have changed the business that much. Exactly.
I think that with the whole advent of this whole concierge movement of software, I think it'll be much more educational. Like, one thing I love about Infusionsoft is each week they have like a customer mastermind webinar that you can join. And the whole thing is like, it's like a weekly mastermind where you can go and say, like, this is my business and this is my problem that I have. And there's somebody from Infusionsoft on the call who can say, like, well, let's talk about ways that our software can help you with that problem. And here's how and here's why. And they're so like, it's so much more than just, if conditions, right? Like it's becomes very much a big, it becomes educational, but the software is a way to kind of automate or facilitate the execution of that information, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Just to wrap up, if you were starting everything all over again, and specifically talking about the list that you run, how they've changed over time, the products you launched, what would you do differently? Would it be different products launching first, doing the weekly newsletter first? What would have set you on a better track?
So I would have definitely started with a quick win, like an ebook. I wouldn't have done SaaS, like building a SaaS first. While it's successful these days, was probably one of the biggest mistakes that I made. So I would have started with the book, and I would have started with I probably wouldn't even started with the book. I would start with like a group webinar type thing, or something that doesn't require me going in any sort of echo chamber, right? Like where I can have something that people can quickly consume, that doesn't require a lot of upfront time, that I can start building up and delivering value. Like the whole goal is value exchange, value in the form of them give us money, we give them betterment of somehow. I think books are a little harder. Nothing compares to like building a SaaS, but even, books can be a lot more upfront effort than doing like a live workshop. So case in point, I did a workshop with Patrick McKenzie that we did as a live GoToWebinar thing, like an all-day event. And we're now converting that to a downloadable product, just taking the videos of this event we've done a few times and packaging them up into a like self-serve, go plug in your credit card, buy it, get the videos, and leave product, which, we all want the waking up with people paying us who we've never met. And it's a lot easier to don't go directly there. Go first with the higher touch, almost like group coaching or consulting or whatever, like path. And then find ways to make it more transactional and more automated.
And going back to when you started, you had pretty much no list, right? Like most of the people listening right now, how would you go about doing something like that first when you don't have a following?
I would borrow other people's audiences. One way to do that is to guest blog, and a lot of guest blogging or guest blogging opportunities might want to see what you've written. So just start writing, even if it's not to anyone yet. And the whole, like, the thing I like about guest blogging or going on somebody else's podcast or doing some sort of collaborative thing is that you're able to really siphon off somebody else's audience. So, what typically happens for me is like when I go on the Freelancer Show podcast, people like they put a lot of effort into getting their own audience, and me going on that podcast is going to siphon some people off to go join my audience also. So that's one of the easier ways. It's a lot easier than, hoping that Google will shower you with organic love and, send you a lot of traffic to get, an audience that way. So I would produce good content, share it, and ask for the sale. Like ask for people, not just the financial sale, but ask people to share your content. Talk to your audience, get to know them. Like there's so many of my customers I know on a really now an individual basis, and it's done nothing but benefit both me and them. So I wouldn't try to look like you're some, out of touch, big whatever when you're not. Like just produce good content, and you don't need to be an expert. You just need to be better at the people, or a little better, or have done more research than the people who you're trying to write for. And that's typically really all it takes.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on today, Brennan. This has been extremely helpful.
Not a problem. Happy to be here.
Why don't you tell everyone where they can sign up for your list?
So freelancersweekly.com is my squeeze page. And that's freelancers with an S. And that's my squeeze page. And if you go on that, actually, even if you're not a consultant, I have what I call a choose your own adventure style onboarding process, which is now actually converting 30% of all new opt-ins are buying one of my products within the first week, which I'm really happy about.
Wow.
Especially since I'm doing some paid acquisition now. So it's definitely worthwhile. Anyway, if you want to just join, and just if it's just a look at how I'm doing that, like I'm basically self-segmenting people into what's the biggest problem in their business. They click a link, and then it's going to tailor every future email they get around that problem. So I've been doing that now, and it's worked out very nicely.
Great. And I just got to say, through listening to all this, it may sound like all you're doing is selling with that list, but it's one of two or three, you, Patrick McKenzie, and probably Amy Hoy, that when they come in, I stop everything and I read it. And most other ones either get deleted or saved for later and then never read. But and we're not even consulting, but there's still so much value in it that can be applied to products, consulting, anything. So there's a lot more than just paid products. There's tons of value there.
And that's another, like, my rule of thumb is any email I send, if you were to strip away anything salesy, which I don't even, like, a lot of my call to actions do not include a product of mine at all. I think that whatever you're sending to people should be, like, even with nothing promotional, like, they should get value out of it just with the free content you're giving away in that email. That's my rule of thumb. Like, even if I wasn't selling anything, people should get to the end of that email and say, it was worth the time I took to read that. And then the value prop becomes, hey, well, give me time and money, and I'll give you even more value in exchange. And that's like sales 101, I think.
Yeah, well, you're nailing it.
Thanks.
But thanks for coming on. This has been really good. Yeah, we'll talk soon.
Cool. Thank you.
If this world were mine, I would place at your feet all that I own. You've been so good to me. If this world were mine, I'd give you the flowers, the birds and the bees. But with your love inside me, that would be all I need. If this world were mine.
Hey guys, welcome to The Collective. I'm Brianne Helfrich, a 26-year-old bioethics PhD student and clothing brand CEO. Welcome to my podcast where we talk all things health and wellness, navigating your 20s, and becoming the best version of yourself. So, sit down, play that episode, and join The Collective.
Hey, this is Mary Beth Lassiter. Are you craving a new podcast? I've got a recommendation. Check out Gravy, the James Beard award-winning podcast that shares stories of the changing American South, brought to you through the foods we eat. It's produced by the Southern Foodways Alliance and distributed by APT Podcast Studios. Listen to Gravy on your porch during happy hour to hear about the mystery of the missing Pappy Van Winkle bourbon. Don't miss out. Follow Gravy wherever you get your podcasts.